Hello and welcome to the Ciao Flower Shop mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. If you are just joining the tutorial series, don't forget to check out the links in the description box below where you will find the links for all of the papers and the other supplies that I am using from the Scrap and Create website to create this album. Let's get into the tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to work on page 3. So for the first piece, I've cut a piece to 5 inches by 8 1/4 inches. I don't need to score anything on this piece. The second piece is 5 inches by 9 1/4 inches. On the 9 1/4 inch side, I need to score this at 1/2 inch and 8 3/4 inches. The next piece measures 5 inches by 6 3/4 of an inch. On the 6 3/4 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the top. Next, I have a piece that measures 5 inches by 5 inches. I'm going to score this on one side at 1/2 inch, and this is going to be along the bottom. Then I have a piece that measures 5 inches by 2 1/2 inches. On the 2 1/2 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch along the bottom. I have another piece that measures 5 inches by 5 inches. I'm going to score this one at 1/2 inch along the bottom of one side. And then I have a piece that measures 6 inches by 1 3/4. On the 6 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch and 5 1/2 inches. Now with all of my pieces, I'm going to go ahead and miter the ends on my 1/2 inch tab section, and then I'm going to use my bone folder to crease all of those score lines. I'm going to take my 5 by 9 1/4 inch piece first and add my adhesive to one of my 1/2 inch tabs so I can build the base of my page. Then I'm going to take my 5 by 8 1/4 inch piece and line up that top edge first, and then make sure those sides are lined up so that everything is straight, and then burnish this down. Then I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to the second 1/2 inch tab section. Smooth everything down and burnish. Then I'm going to take my 6 3/4 by 5 inch piece. The tab is at the top. I'm going to apply my adhesive here, and then I'm going to place this right at the top of my page, making sure that that score line is straight across, and then burnish it down. Then I'll take my 5 inch by 5 inch piece. I'm going to apply my adhesive to my tab, and I'm going to place this one at the bottom of the flap that I just put on. So I'm going to place that score line even with the bottom edge, make sure that my sides are lined up straight, and then adhere this down. Now I'm going to open this one up. I've got my 2 1/2 by 5 inch piece. I'm going to apply my adhesive here. And then I'm going to place this one so that that score line is at the bottom edge of that flap we just put on. Again, make sure that your sides are straight, and then burnish this down. Then I'm going to close this up and open that larger flap. I'll take my 5 inch flap and apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section first. And then this I'm going to apply to the bottom of the page so that my score line is lined up with the bottom of the page and those sides are lined up nice and straight. My last piece I'm not going to put on yet because I'm going to fussy cut around this belly band before I put it on the page. So I'm just going to set it aside for now. And I'm going to flip over and we're going to start building up the back side of the page. The first piece for the back side measures 8.5 by 5 3/4. On the 8.5 inch side, we're going to score this at 4 1/4 inches. Next, I have a piece that measures 4 3/4 by 5 3/4. On the 4 3/4 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the right-hand side. Then I have a piece that measures 6 3/4 by 8 1/4. On the 6 3/4 inch side, I'm going to score this at 6 1/4 and 2.5 inches. The next piece is 3 3/4 by 3.5. On the 3.5 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the bottom. Then I have two pieces that measure 4 1/8 by 5.5. On the 5.5 inch side, I'm going to score on the right-hand side at 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to go ahead and miter my corners on my 1/2 inch tab sections and then take my bone folder and crease all of these score lines. Now for the 6 3/4 by 8 1/4 inch piece, I did fold back on my 1/2 inch tab, then I'm going to fold over on my other score line to create a piece that looks like this. I'm going to start with this piece, apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section, and then I'm going to adhere this piece to the left side of my page. So I'm going to line up my score line with the edge of my page, make sure that my top and bottom edges are straight across, and then burnish this down. Next, I'm going to take my 3 3/4 by 3.5 inch piece and make sure that it will fit here, closing, and you will not see the edge of this sticking out. Mine sticks out just a little tiny bit, so I'm going to just take my scissors. You can also use your trimmer if you don't feel comfortable doing it with your scissors, but I'm just taking a little tiny sliver off, and hopefully that will be enough. It looks like it will be. Once I have enough of it removed, I can go ahead and apply my adhesive here and place this down here at the bottom. Lining everything up. Again, I'm going to close this first, make sure it closes, and then I'll burnish it down. Then I'm going to take my two 4 1/8 by 5.5 inch pieces. I'm going to place one up here at the top, one down here at the bottom. I want to make sure that they do not overlap on my page in the center at all. So if you need to trim them this direction, you can. And then making sure that they are at the edge of my page, I'm going to close this and make sure, and I'm going to do this from the back side, that the actual flaps themselves will fit on the page and they're not sticking off at all. So if your paper is cut a little bit too large, you might see some of this sticking over, so you want to trim down these edges. But as long as your pieces are good, we're going to go ahead and apply them down. So I'm going to put adhesive on one of my flaps first. I'm going to bring it up here, make sure that it is lined up with the top and the side. And again, I'm going to close this to make sure everything will close and it's not stuck in that score line over here and puckers when I try to close that page. Then I'll take my second one and apply my adhesive here. And then I'm going to make sure that I place this at the bottom edge, and I have a nice tiny little gap here between my two flaps, very minuscule, so it will not overlap at all, which is what I want. Then I'm going to burnish this down. Now taking my booklet, I have my booklet opening to my left. I'm going to use my centering ruler so that I can place this right in the center of my page. So first I'm just centering it top to bottom. And then I'm going to make sure that it is also centered left to right. And once I have it centered, I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to draw a line at the top and the bottom. This is where I'm going to place my adhesive to place my card on the front of here. So I only want to adhere it to this section. So just a little bit of adhesive there. And then I'm going to place this back down. And making sure that it is still centered left to right. I forgot I usually put little dots so that I know where to place this back on the page, but I forgot. So now I have this, and this is not going to actually be a flap. This is going to become a pocket. So this card will still be fine because this is going to open up this direction, but it doesn't have to open this way. With this piece, I'm going to be placing this piece in here. Now here's where you need to decide if you want this flap to be underneath. So you'll have this on the page and opens like this, or if you want this flap to be on the front and it opens this direction. Now for me, I think, so this is the back of the page. I'm going to use a ribbon closure. So I think I'm going to put it here so that the ribbon will sit here instead of in here. So then that means I'm going to take this, open this up, place my adhesive on my 1/2" tab section. And then I am going to adhere this to the edge, but I need to make sure, I might need to actually trim my other flap just a little bit. So once I have this on, when this is closed, see how this puckers just a little tiny bit? I hope you can see that. It's just a little bit too big. It's going into my score line. So I'm going to bring my paper trimmer in, and I am going to trim just a tiny bit off of here. And again, you can use your scissors here if you prefer, but we're just taking a little teeny tiny sliver out. That way, when this goes in here, this one goes over top, everything does close nice and neatly now. So this is the back of our page. We're going to have a trifold here with a ribbon closure. This will be a pocket, and then this will open up. pocket here, and then these two flaps will open up for the main part of the page. Next, we're going to flip back to the front side and start using our decorative papers to decorate the page. This is the 8x8 paper I'm going to be using to start with the front of my page. So the first thing I did was cut this strip off here, and I made sure to cut this so that I didn't cut into the yellow of this piece, but also it barely cut into the little head of the watering can. So it's about 1 3/4, just slightly less. Then I measured over 4 3/4 and I cut this piece off so I had this center section. Then I went over here and I cut this one so it's just over the fresh cut piece, and this actually measures a little bit, I guess it should be 1 5/8. So this is 1 5/8, so if you cut that there, and then this one is 4 1/4 inch, I believe. Yep. So this is 4 1/4 by 4 3/4. Now this is the piece that I'm going to be putting right here on the center of this piece, but I'm going to be using this piece up here as well. So I'm going to adhere this one and this one. And then I'm going to fussy cut this piece out because this is the piece we're going to use for our belly band that I told you that we were going to put on later. Now I'm going to open this up and I'm going to be placing my magnet first down here. And I'm going to place this in the center and just a little bit up from the tip of the page. So the center of my magnet is about 1/2 inch from this bottom edge. And then I'm going to be taking about a 1 inch loop of ribbon and I'm going to apply this right here. Actually, that's a little too much, so I'm going to cut it off a little bit because I only want a small loop and I don't want the ribbon to be over top of the magnet. I'm going to place that ribbon in a loop right at the end. Once I have my ribbon on, I'll go ahead and place my second magnet on top of the first, and then I'm going to adhere this so that it's in the correct place here. And then from this 12 by 12 paper, I've cut one piece that measures 4 3/4 by 10 1/2, and then I've cut this into 3 pieces. So the first piece measures just slightly less than 4 1/2 inches, and it's going to go here right above that score line, and you should have a very small little white border between those 2 pieces. And if you do not, it looks like mine actually isn't super straight, so something must have been slightly crooked. I'm gonna cut this a little bit more so that it does look a little bit better. But you can trim that so that that fits perfectly there. Then this next piece measures 1 3/4 inch, and it's going to go here on top of this one to cover the magnet in the end of the ribbon. We're gonna save that final piece for later. Now from that same 12 by 12 paper, I'm going to use the opposite side, and I cut one more piece to 4 3/4 by 2 1/2. I'm going to place this one up here, and then I'm going to put some adhesive down these sides and turn this smaller flap into a pocket. Now all of these are from different A4 sheets, so I've got the little journaling card here I'm going to place in the pocket, and then I've got these 2 tags that I'm going to place in here as well. Now I'm going to close this, and then we're going to come here. First, I've got 2 pieces of ribbon that are cut to about 9 inches in length, and I'm going to place the first one here off of the bottom of my page. I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to take this piece that we cut earlier and place it here, covering that end of my ribbon. Once this paper's on, I'm going to come up here to my upper flap and place my ribbon off of the edge of it. So I'm going to place my second ribbon there. And then from the same paper that we had been using, I had that strip, I think it was over here across the top, that was 1.5 inches by 4 3/4. So I'm going to place this here. And then I cut from the opposite side another piece that measures 4 3/4 by 4.5. And I'm going to place this one here with a small gap between them. And then from my 12 by 12 paper, I have cut this little memories piece, and I'm going to place this one here, and I'm only going to adhere down this top portion. So I did go ahead and add this piece to my belly band, and then I fussy cut around the top and the bottom. I'm going to leave these ends like this, and then I did remiter my corners on my 1/2 inch tabs. Now I'm going to stick some brads down through here just because I want it to look more decorative. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to. It is purely for decoration, has no function really to it. So I'm just going to take my piercing tool. So with my piercing tool, I'm just going to pierce right through on the paper where those little brown dots are, and then place some brads through there and open them up on the back side. So this is what my piece looks like, and I'm going to be placing it in the center of my page. So I'm just going to use my centering ruler to make sure that I've lined this up in the center. Apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tabs, and then I'm going to place this right in the center. Then for the paper that I'm going to put on the background, I'm going to be using this 8 by 8, and I've cut this to 4 3/4 by 8 inches. It's just going to tuck right underneath here and cover the entire background of my page. And then down here, I'm going to continue using this paper that I've been using, and I've got a piece. So I first cut this whole entire piece together, and it was, I don't know which direction it is, right here like this. So I cut this to 4 3/4 by 4 1/4, and I cut this to 3.5 inches. And I'm going to flip this piece over and put this piece down here. The last thing I need to do is make some photo mats for under my belly band. So I've just cut 2 pieces of white cardstock to 4 inches by 6 inches. I've taken my last 2 cards that I had from my 12 by 12 papers. I'm going to be using these 2 sides, but if you prefer the other sides, you can use those. And I'm going to place one of these on the front of each of these photo mats. Then from this 12 by 12 paper, I've cut this side over here, but I'm using this side, and I've cut 2 pieces to 3 3/4 by 5 3/4, and I will place these on the back sides for the photos. Now, if you already have photos that you're putting in the album as you go, you can just put your photo on here and you don't have to put this decorative paper if you don't want to. But I'm going to put these all together, and I'm placing them in my belly band. So here are my 2 cards. Now you can add some decorations to these if you want to. I might come back later and do that, but for now I'm just going to leave them plain as is. So I will just place both of these here underneath my belly band like this. Then I'm going to close this up and then tie my ribbons into a bow to close my page. And then I'm going to flip over and start on the back side of the page with my decorative papers next. I did go ahead and untie the bow on the front side just so my page will lay a little flatter. I've cut 2 more pieces of my ribbon to 9 inches, and I am going to first start by placing one on my front closure here, right in my center. And I'm going to open this one up and place my second one off the left edge on the flap below. So just again in the center, but for this one, when I place this one on here, I'm going to place this here and then make sure that it is also lined up with the one that I've already placed on the front flap. From my A4 papers, these were on the same exact sheet. I've cut both of these ones out. And then this one was on a separate sheet from the A4 paper. Now this one, I am going to come in here and I'm going to cut this center section out like we did before and use this as a frame. So I will do this in just a minute on camera, but I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to place this card here on the front of this one. And then I'm going to place this one on the front of this side. Now with this one, I'm going to start with my craft knife and then I will likely switch over to my fussy cutting scissors because I think it'll be easier. So I'm just going to get this started here and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut out the rest of this. And I'm going to leave this green in the corner. I'm going to cut straight up through here. So maybe I will show you all the straight places. And I'm going to use a ruler to do this so that this stays nice and straight. So that's going to be a straight piece. This section here. And then down this side as well. And then I'm going to leave the butterfly attached to the frame. So I'm going to fussy cut around the butterfly and around these corners here. I'm going to open the booklet up fully and take my frame piece. Now it is a little bit smaller than I would really want it to be, just a little bit, but I'm going to compensate on the sides for this. So just like we did previously, you need to decide which side you are going to leave open, or you can leave, you know, like a top and a side open to slide your photo down, whatever you prefer to do. So I am going to apply my adhesive down here to the bottom and the right edge, and then across the top, leaving my left side open to slide that photo in later. And then I'm just going to place this right here in the center. And adhere this down. So then this left side is open, then the photo will slide in later. Now this piece I'm going to adhere back into the center. So I'm going to make sure that I get adhesive on all those little jagged pieces and edges before I put this in. And very carefully, I'm going to place it in there and use my bone folder to press it down and pull that frame piece up, just like we did on, I believe it was the first page, maybe it was the second page, I don't even remember now. So put it in the center. And I'm going to take my bone folder here to get this under all these little pieces. And then for these two flaps, I have cut another piece from this 12 by 12. So these are about 4 1/8 of an inch by 5 1/2. Now, one of them I cut a little tiny bit smaller than the other one. So this one's a little bit smaller because this flap is a tiny bit smaller to accommodate for that seam over here. So what I'm going to do is place these right up against that score line, making sure I don't place them too far. So that makes this border in here a little less. It would be like there was a 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch on each side like here, except for it's just all in the center. So I'm going to adhere both of these down. And then from my A4 papers, I've cut these. I'm going to adhere just the top portion down on this one here at the top right, and the bottom portion down on this one on the bottom left. That way photos will slide behind those. Now from this same paper, I've just cut a piece that's 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, and then I have cut this to 2 pieces. Now I just realized when I measured that my booklet is not actually in the center, it's off slightly, but what you should be able to do is cut 2 pieces that are 1 1/8 of an inch, and then you'll be able to place one here and one here. Now, if you want to measure this to be sure your pieces are the correct size, go ahead and measure it before you cut your piece, but you will need that 2 1/4 inch piece and then cut according to your measurements. I'm going to be using this 8x8 paper here. I've cut one piece that measures 1 1/4 inches. I'm going to apply this here to this left side, and then I'm going to take and put adhesive down these sides and then close this to form a pocket. Then I'm going to open up. I've cut 2 more pieces. These ones measure 4 3/4 by just slightly less than 4 inches. One is going to go on the front here, and one is going to go on the front here. And I'm going to push them up a little bit closer to the middle. That way I have that uniform border on the outside edges and then 1/8 of an inch in between those 2 flaps. So I completely forgot that I needed to put a magnet under this flap, and I'm just going to improvise now. So I have cut this piece from the A4 paper. I'm going to take a magnet and place it, so this piece is going to be here, and let's see, I'm going to place my magnet closer to my right hand side of my paper. Then I'm going to back this onto a piece of cardstock and fussy cut around it. So now that I have my magnet between those layers, I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to bring my magnet over. Actually, I'm just gonna put it a little bit closer to the corner so it doesn't look funny. And I'm going to apply adhesive to the left and bottom edges of this piece and make a little tuck spot that I will tuck a tag in when I'm finished with the page. And now that I have that on, I'll go ahead and place my magnet here. Now it is the opposite direction just because I didn't do it the correct way. So I'm just going to close this so I know where to place that magnet. And then I'm going to set that magnet here. Now this is one of the cards from the A4 collection that I have just taken. I've cut it out and then I've cut it down. I've trimmed it so it is about 3 1/2 inches by 2 5/8 of an inch. And I'm going to place it here, covering that magnet on the pocket. From this leftover piece of the 8x8 paper, I've cut a piece to 3/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to place it here. Then for this here, I've taken this 12 by 12 paper, and I liked this section here, so I cut this to 3 1/2 by 6 1/2. It's longer than I need, but I wanted the butterfly and I wanted this piece in here. So I'm going to adhere this to the top portion. Then I'm going to place my adhesive on the sides and flip this up to form that pocket for that flap. I'm going to open my flaps up. I'm going to start here in the center. I have a piece here from this 12 by 12 paper that I've cut to 4 3/4 by 8 inches that I'm just going to place right directly in the center of the page. Now over here, since I used this paper, I've actually decided that I'm going to finish the rest of the page with this here. So I've cut from the bottom right corner. I've cut these pieces to 4 3/4 by just slightly less than 4 inches. And I'm going to place this one here and this one here. And just like I did on the fronts, I'm going to actually place them up a little bit closer to the middle so that there's a uniform border on the outside and an 1/8 inch in between. Now the last thing I'm going to do is just add this as a decoration down here. You can add it in the center if you want. Just trying to decide where I like the look of it. I think I actually like it in the center. So I am going to just be adhering down this right edge. That way, if you want to slide a photo underneath of it, you have the option to do so. Then I'm going to add some tags in this pocket and the one on the front. For this inside pocket, I've cut these two from 2 of the A4 sheets, and I'm just going to place those in here. This is from the 12 by 12 paper, and I'm going to place this in here. Then I'm going to close these flaps, and then these two are also from the A4 papers, and I'm going to place those in this little tuck spot here. Then I'm going to close this. Make sure, perfect, so everything does stay closed. So once I have all of that done, I'm going to flip over to the front side and retie this into a bow to keep it closed. Now that is it for page 3. We are done with the page and with this tutorial. If you are just joining the tutorial series, don't forget to check out the links in the description box below, where I have all of the Ciao Flower Shop papers that I am using, as well as the flowers that I'll be using for the album cover. You can just click on those, purchase these products, and follow along. I'll see you in the next tutorial.